Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Abby Currier, and I'm the Community Engagement and Events Coordinator here at the History Center of Olmsted County. I'm so excited to see everyone on here tonight, and I look forward to learning more this evening about material culture with Annette Atkins. Here at the History Center of Olmsted County, we invite people to gather and explore and examine our past as we educate ourselves about the stories of Olmsted County and southeastern Minnesota. We're so excited that you have decided to join us tonight as we take a look at one of these stories. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation from Annette Atkins on Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, Looking Down at American History. After her presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes for questions from the audience. During the presentation, feel free to put any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. But before we get started, I did just want to go over a couple of logistical things. For tonight, we normally ask people to stay muted, but we would ask you to actually unmute yourselves because we're going to have more of an interactive presentation. So there will be questions. And did I freeze? Nope, they're still nodding along.
You're freezing just the tiniest bit.
Okay. So like I said, if you can leave yourself unmuted, we are going to have some interaction tonight. And then tomorrow morning, I will also send out any resources that we discuss along with a quick survey. We recommend watching this in presenter's view, but if you want to see everyone participating together, you can do that by clicking the view button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you're joining us from an iPad, you may have to swipe a couple of times to change the view. We are recording tonight's program, so please keep that in mind. And we are so excited about tonight's talk and hope that you will continue to join us for some of our future events, where we will talk about everything from caves to voting rights to the Confederate flag and everything in between. These talks are one of the many great benefits to having a membership to the History Center of Olmsted County. We certainly hope that you will continue to join us for these talks, and we also hope that you will consider getting a membership to experience even more benefits. Tonight, we're joined by Annette Atkins, who taught at St. John's University/College of St. Benedict for 35 years. She is the author of 4 books, including We Grew Up Together, Adult Siblings in the 19th Century America, from the University of Illinois Press 2000, and Creating Minnesota, A History from the Inside Out, published both in 2008 and 2018 by the Minnesota Historical Society Press. For 5 years, Kathy Werzer and Annette Atkins talked history on NPR's Morning Edition. Annette?
Hi, Abby. Thank you very much. And thanks for this opportunity. And Evelyn and Wayne and Darla, even, I would love to have all of you turn your faces on. Because I'm going to talk and I'm going to show some slides, but I want to start at the very least by asking, how many of you loved history in school?
I liked history, yeah.
Evelyn, did you love it as a kid?
A little, yeah, a little. Mm-hmm. But more lately.
I hated it as a kid. I hated it in grade school. I hated it in high school. Because it was I didn't understand why it was, and I certainly didn't see that it had any connection to me. I also had a couple terrible teachers. You know, often the teachers were people who were trained to do something else and got put in a classroom, or wanted to do something else, like coach the basketball team, and were forced to do something. So a lot of the history that I studied was military history and presidential history. And people still like to ask me when they find out I'm an historian, can you name all the presidents? And actually, I'm not very good at naming all the presidents. So that part never took. But I began to be interested in it when I got to college, and had some pretty, well, I started college in 1968, which was such a transitional and important time in American history. And all of a sudden, kind of everybody was talking about who we were and how we got there and what we could do, and what was the history of the civil rights movement, and why hadn't women had more rights for a longer period, and what about poverty, and you know, in the sort of in the decade around that, there were a number of books published that really set the agenda for society, I think, in many ways. One was Michael Harrington's The Other America, which was about poverty. One was Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, which was about devastation of the environment. One, of course, was Betty Friedan and the Feminine Mystique. One was James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and one was the Unsafe at Any Speed. Tell me his name.
Ralph
Nader. Thank you very much. So those books came out within a very short period of time, and they kind of alerted many people. So, I mean, to the vitality of written work, the vitality of school, the vitality of making our educations relevant to our lives. And indeed, I think many of my own faculty members increasingly saw intellectual work as absolutely foundational for being a good citizen. So that was the environment in which I sort of came of age in the historical profession. And, you know, historians, particularly after that, could do lots of different kinds of history. And the kind that interested me most was what we then called social history. And it's now really social and cultural history. What I wanted to know was, how did people live in the past? What were their lives like? And how did their lives intersect with the larger society? Where did it touch? Where did it not touch? Where was it shaped by? Where was it shaped against? And that's really how I've organized my own intellectual work. Some of this was, some of my interest in this was also intensified. My husband, before we were married, lived for many years in New York City. So we've often gone back to New York City, and we stay at the University Club when we go there. And first, the University Club has a swimming pool, and I love swimming, but women cannot swim in that swimming pool at the University Club. It was built without a women's locker room, and it's an old building at 55th and 5th. So putting in a women's locker room has never been economically feasible. So, okay, it's just one of the things. You go there, he can swim, I can't swim. Well, that form of discrimination irritated me, and has irritated me every single time I've gone there. But the deeper kind for me, and what has had a longer term effect, were all of the portraits in the University Club. When you walk down the steps, and there are 8 floors, and you can walk all the way down, and there are portraits of men all the way down this beautiful, wonderful, curved staircase. There are 2 portraits of women in there, neither of whom I had heard of or have since heard of, both of whom had very beautiful décolletage, sort of lace. So they were there clearly because they were beautiful, because they were society wives of some kind, and not because they were accomplished in any other particular way. And I thought, how different my life would be if I had spent my life surrounded by portraits of women who had done amazing, remarkable things. Now, I couldn't believe that there were no women who had done amazing, remarkable things, was my first step. So then you go out and look for amazing, remarkable women, and there were plenty to find. But my second turn was, in order to be historically important, I wonder if we simply need to be doing what we do. So that, Evelyn, say, in your case, what would make you a significant historical actor wouldn't be that you ran for president of the United States, but that you carved out a life of meaning in the place where you lived. Or Jean, that you crafted a family at a particular time with particular values, given particular constraints, on your time and on your opportunity. So I really have crafted the rest of my career around paying attention to what people like Abby and Evelyn and Jean have done, but also what people like Wayne have done, right? So how do we define what's important and what's significant? Okay, then my last turn has been, I am a woman doing history. I wonder if there is a way for me to do it that's not just my looking at women, but that I can do it by caring about the things that I care about. And so this is a long way around to talking about the shoes that I'm going to introduce you to in a minute. Now, I am not a shoe maniac. Right? I am not insane about shoes, but I thought I have cared about them for a long time. Again, I'll go back to 1968. I abandoned high heels after my senior year in high school. And in college, all I wanted were flat, comfortable tie shoes. And that marked me as a particular kind of person, right? And I know this for sure because one of my older sisters has still not forsaken her high heels, right? She loves high heels and she has the feet to prove it, right? And so I think if you look at Linda's feet, my sister Linda's feet, you know a lot about her. If you look at my feet, you know a lot about me. But more truthfully, if you look at her shoes and if you look at my shoes, which makes me think about how in contemporary America, we use objects of adornment as carriers of our identity, right? That we are making statements about who we are by what we wear, what we surround ourselves with, how we do our hair, what kind of makeup we do. And isn't that an interesting aspect of 20th and 21st century America? So what I want to talk about a little bit today, and I am now going to share my screen. Oh, yep. But I still have you over here, so I'm still going to be talking to you. Okay, because, right? Here are my shoes of choice at the moment. Right. These are made in Portugal. They're called archipedicos, though they're in the style of Mary Jane's. Do any of you know anything about Mary Jane? I mean, who the Mary Jane was? In Buster Brown, I mean, and there are Buster Browns, which are boys' shoes, and there are Mary Janes, which are girl shoes. So they really come out of a cartoon at the beginning of the 20th century. So the Mary Jane always has a strap over the top and a rounded toe, and they're flat. Buster Browns are usually brown or black lace-up shoes. So the girls get Mary Ann and boys get Buster Brown. So first thing, I mean, these are women's shoes. Obviously, these are women's shoes. It has not always been the case that women's shoes and men's shoes were so different that by looking at them, you could tell right away. But if I ask you, all right, if you look at my shoes, what do you conclude about me just from looking at these shoes?
You want something comfortable.
Yeah.
You're sensible.
You bet. That's my favorite. Yeah.
But they're also professional, you know, they're not fuzzy slippers or flip-flops.
That's right. And so I can sort of get away with wearing these, and particularly in the winter, I'd wear them with black tights. So they kind of dress them up a little bit. My less generous friends have referred to these as the best in a long line of otherwise objectionable nuns' shoes. Who wears these shoes? And particularly, they also say they're old lady shoes. Right. But I've been wearing old lady shoes since I was not an old lady. Right. No, I also happen to own this pair. Right. Whole different me that you get in there. So I love showing off this pair too. You can see, however, that these are much less worn than the black ones. Right. The red, you gotta save red for a special event. But what I love about them is that they say, she might not be all that she appears at first glance to be. Right. So, but now I'm going to turn to you and ask you, what shoes do you wear? Abby, you have to go first, but you have to unmute yourself and tell me about your shoe wardrobe.
Yeah. Am I muted at the moment?
No, there you're back.
Okay. Yeah, I was having some camera issues. So I am almost always in a pair of Converse.
Oh,
So the way my job functions is I don't know what's happening each day. So closed-toed is a must. And I could be inside at a computer all day. I could be outside moving wagons. I could and there's a whole range of different stuff that could happen in between. So being able to have a shoe that is comfortable, closed-toed, and that I can either be upright in all day and fits well is for me the most important.
and much more substantial than my Archipedicos here. Right.
Mhm.
These are good and solid, but I wouldn't want to be moving anything around much.
Right. I can get paint on these, they can get dirty, and I don't care.
So they're very kind of workwoman shoes that
Yeah.
you have on. But why are they Converse?
I don't know. So I also just like plain. So I couldn't do the red shoes
Uh-huh.
because in the mornings, I don't want to make too many choices. I want to have just grab a pair of shoes. It'll go with whatever I'm wearing that day and it'll be fine. So they're just the standard black Converse. It takes me about 5 minutes to buy a new pair because I walk in, I know exactly where they are in the store, grab the right size and walk out.
Excellent. So what kind of shoes does the vice president wear?
She also wears Converse.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great
Right.
connection. I mean, of course you'd wear it. So it's you and Vice President Harris.
Yeah.
You're right there together with your, and she's been just wonderful in her wearing of those shoes too.
Mhm.
So for the inauguration, of course, she had on those just gigantic high heels.
Mhm.
But sort of the second that was over, she was back she's a woman doing business.
Right.
Very
they're
impressive.
comfortable to me.
And let's see, Jean, how about you? Do you have Converse like your daughter?
I do not have Converse, but I do spend the majority of my time in sneakers. With my job delivering the mail, I never know what I'm going to be walking out into. Could be mud, could be snow, could be grass. Sometimes I'm walking into a barn to deliver a package. So I'm usually in sneakers. I do have, my dress shoes are pretty plain. I have a pair of beige ones, a pair of black ones. A few years ago, I did branch out and get a pair of very light pale pink ones to go with an outfit. Yes, everyone noticed that I did not have black or beige shoes on when I wore those.
Well, I'm interested. I know the brand name of mine. I also know the style name if pressed. Abby, I'm already at the you. You know the brand name of yours. Jean, you don't identify yours by brand.
Nope, I go in and find whatever fits and is most comfortable.
Is branding is also one of the really interesting aspects of 20th and 21st century decisions about how we identify ourselves. And that if you wear ASOS, it sort of means one thing. If you wear Nike, if you wear Kmart, that those all are indicators of different choices that people have made. Evelyn, can I put you on the spot too and ask about your shoes?
Usually it's flat shoes. It can be tennis shoes, could be Mary Jane shoes, anything that will feel comfortable that I try on, not particular brands.
Okay. So the comfort really is sort of key. Were you a
Right.
nurse? Were you? Did
No,
you?
but I did a lot of walking and at the clinic, so
Yeah.
I had to go, so I needed something very comfortable to walk.
So if you have a desk job, if one has a desk job, you can make different decisions about your shoes. Though some of my friends have shown me their desk drawer, it's usually the lower left or lower right, full of shoes. Right. So you wear the comfortable ones to get to work, and then you put on the uncomfortable ones while you're sitting at your desk or going out for lunch with somebody, and then you can put those in your lower drawer. Wayne, I'm going to ask you a different question. How many pairs of shoes do you think you have?
Probably got 6 pairs of shoes, 7 maybe.
Okay, then how many if you add in boots?
Probably 10.
Okay, and do you have like sandals or flip-flops or ice skates or ski boots or?
I have those newer rubber ones that people wear. What are those called? I can't remember. Crocs.
Oh, Crocs, yes,
Yeah, so I have a
Crocs.
pair of Crocs. Yeah,
Okay, so now are we up to
maybe 11 or 12.
11? And it's interesting, when we go to our closets, we almost all have more shoes than we think we have.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting, which means that we have been tempted and lured by the larger society into buying more shoes even than we pay attention to. And perhaps more than we need, and certainly perhaps more than we, no, I probably own 10 pairs of flat black shoes.
Oh,
I mean, just not counting anything else in my wardrobe. Oh, I'm not going to say flat shoes. I'm going to say 10 pairs of shoes, because I do have my wear to the funeral shoes, right? Those flat black ones, I like to be a little dressier if I go to a funeral. Or I recently bought a new pair of shoes that I'm going to, if you can see me at all, do you see this with this pink heel on it?
yeah.
And the other shoe has a
Wow.
purple heel on it. Aren't those just great? And my feet were just wrecked by the end of the day, but I felt so great in my shoes. All right, so on average, well, no, let me ask. So, Abby, how many pairs of shoes do you imagine you own?
I'm going to go with like 25.
Excellent. Good girl. I mean,
For
I don't mean
counting all?
girl, of course, but yeah,
Yeah.
25.
25, and I maybe wear each of them once a year and then just always wear the Converse.
Yep. Jean, how many do you have?
If we're counting in boots as well, then I'd probably say I probably have 10.
Okay. And Darla, you're down there. I want to hear from you. How many do you own?
I would have to say 35 or 40.
Yep. Yep. And on average, Evelyn, I'll come back to you for another question in a minute. On average, men in the United States own 17 pairs of shoes. And on average, women own 27 pairs of shoes. That means there are a whole lot of people out there who have 35, right, or more. And my sister Linda with those high heels, she has so many shoes that she's hidden some in a suitcase under her bed, so her husband doesn't know that she has bought more shoes, right? So, and I'm doing all of this kind of superficially silly stuff about shoes, only to say that we live in a society that has really commercialized and industrialized in amazing ways. And if I take you back to Sarah Christie Stevens, Sarah was probably born in Northern Ireland. With her family, moved to Wisconsin, in the late 1850s, and then moved to Minnesota in the 1860s. Her brothers fought in the Civil War. She became a teacher eventually. She taught math at Carleton College. She is elected to the school board in Blue Earth County, in Blue Earth. And as best as I can tell, and her brothers were so critical of her for her concern about her looks. And you can see in this photo of her on the left, look at that hat, that her collar, her dress, her shawl. She couldn't have any more designs on her than she already has. So this is a woman who really cares about how she looks, right? And I estimate from her records, from her commercial records, her bookkeeping, that she may have owned 4 pairs of shoes. And so my historical question is, how do we get from her 4 to my 25, or Abby's 25, or Darla's 35? What has happened in American society that has taken us from there to here? And so I've done a lot of kind of thinking about that, but I'm interested in how any of you might think about how we got from there to here. Why don't you have only 4 pairs of shoes? Why do you have more? And what does that tell us about American society then and now? This is why the disadvantage of your being here in a small group is that I get to call on each of you and you have to answer all these questions. You can't just hide behind somebody else, but
I'll talk.
good. Evelyn, come.
I think because we feel that we need to have something different for each activity, what we do, or we need to have a certain color, black, brown, blue, for the outfit that we have on.
And one of the ways that I would identify that or name that too is specialization, right? If you have one kind of outfit on, you need one kind of shoes. If you have a different kind of outfit, you need a different kind. Or if you're going outside in the winter, you need your Uggs. If you go out in March, you need your what do we call those? Wayne, that you have Crocs, right? You might want to wear your Crocs instead of your Uggs. So, and I think it's interesting to think about the extent to which all of us in America have been specialized in our tastes, in our sense of ourselves, in our selves between then and now, right? And you think, the parallel specialization that has been going on in American society over that time is really factories and factory work. And the heart of factory work is to specialize production. So you break it down into its smallest, most specific piece. I think, wow, I didn't know I was being turned into a kind of factory. But the same forces at work that have made the production of textiles, of cars, of TVs more efficient has made me more attentive to the need to match the this to the that, right? And also to have exactly the right tool if you're in business, if you're in the factory. But the tool then for me is having just the right shoe, like my go to a funeral shoe. Right? It's important to me that I fit in, that I honor the conventions, and so I have specialized my shoe wardrobe so that I can do that. Evelyn, thank you. That's one of the most important pieces, I think. But there are bunches of them. Abby,
Yeah.
Wayne, Darla, Jean, you got any other ideas?
Well, I think building off of Evelyn's idea, not only that we feel we need different shoes for different activities, but that they're available.
Yeah.
You know, when I go to the shoe store, there's a whole row just of boots. I think the last pair of shoes I bought was in the clearance section. I'm like, well, I don't know if a pair of blue flats, I'm sure I'll find a need for them. They were $10. And, you know, I can walk in with pretty much any picture of a shoe in my mind of what I need or what I want that I think I need.
Yeah.
And it's available in 3 different designs at least, even if it's, you know, fire engine red with at least a 1-inch heel and some sort of bedazzle. There'll be several different options.
And so that you're right. It just builds right on that specialization. One effect of factory production is that it brings prices down.
Mhm.
And once prices come down, and the other thing that factories, it's more complicated, but Henry Ford wanted the workers in his factory to be able to buy their products. And so he needed to pay them enough that they could buy a Ford at some point. And so the cost of the shoes comes down so that we can all buy them. And I have a couple pairs of expensive shoes, like those black ones that I wear all the time. Those are not cheap shoes, but I have a whole lot of my 25 pairs are shoes that I bought exactly in the situation that Abby did. Right. They were on sale or they were cheap, or I mean, a little flip-flops to wear to swimming. You can now buy those for like $2. Right. So there's this just greater availability. One of the subjects that I have studied, and it's going to sound initially like it's not related to this, is the production of oranges in California in the 1870s, 1890s. There were orange plantations located in Pasadena and Riverside, California, that so increased the number of oranges that were being produced that the California Fruit Growers Association, which you would now know as a sort of father of Sunkist, launched a huge advertising effort to get people to buy oranges. And it's just remarkable how people's purchase of oranges goes up from the 1890s to 1920, 1925, and then after. Right? Okay, Jean, you're the mother here. So you tell me, what should every good mother serve her children for breakfast if she wants them to be healthy?
Well, there should be fruit of some sort. There should be milk. There should be eggs, you know, something for protein. I know when I was growing up, it was rather regimented. You know, Mondays was this food, Tuesdays was this food, you know, we had 5 different, you know, but it was always you know, there was milk, there was juice, there was fruit, and then there was fried eggs or there was pancakes.
Yep.
And
you said my magic word, which was orange juice.
Yep.
I mean, if you're a good mother, fruit is a good thing, but orange juice. I mean, it's how you help kids fight the cold. It's how you help them stay healthy. Well, this was absolutely the line of the California Fruit Growers Association. They directed their advertising at mothers to get them to provide orange juice for their children. Now, orange juice has a huge advantage over oranges if you're the California Fruit Growers Association, right? I'm sure that none of you ever have, but in my many experiences with Weight Watchers, one of the first lessons they tell you is do not drink orange juice, eat oranges. Because a glass of orange juice has the sugar in it of 5 or 6 oranges, right? The reason that those oranges are that orange juice was pushed so hard was that the fruit growers were able to take a lot of the non-beautiful fruit and turned it into juice. And the real kicker for this connection between orange juice and health was the flu epidemic of 1918. That people were grasping at whatever they could to help protect their children. And the fruit growers stepped right in and said, here is the solution to your problem. And so they made such a powerful case that I don't even know if it's true or not, but I think that I'm doing better if I drink orange juice and if I serve orange juice. A very similar thing happened to shoes, right? Or to the production of shoes or coats or cars, or right, that we got persuaded to buy more than we needed. Not by people telling us we want more, but we need more. So it's that elision of want into need that turned American society into consumers. So I don't just say, I want another pair of black shoes. I say, well, I need another pair of black shoes. I mean, and I don't even think about it anymore because it has already moved. And I've been allowed to make that transition and to give me some, and there's such a pleasure in buying a new thing. The creation of the shoe box was a stroke of genius in the shoe industry. And the correspondence around the creation of that box had to do with making shoes into a gift that a person gives to herself or to himself. And aren't those shoe boxes great? It also makes them easier to ship, of course, and they fit better on the shelf. The boxes fit better on the shelves. But the idea, in part, was to create a present for each of us. Oh, and I am completely seduced by that. And if I had to open this closet behind me, I would be embarrassed for you to see how many shoe boxes I have saved. I have friends who still keep their shoes in their shoe boxes and have had closets designed to show off their shoes in the boxes labeled at the end, you know, blue suede shoes, this box. Right? So I feel like I bought the whole present thing. Right? I just thought I would locate her. Right, so she's in Good Thunder and Blue Earth County. So not quite in Rochester, not quite in York, but she lives in a nothing town in a very underpopulated county. And I'm not, I mean, oh, I'll come back to him in a minute. Here is the village of Good Thunder in Blue Earth County. And I think there wasn't even a street across the street. So I think this really is a pretty good representation of Blue Earth County. When Sarah needed shoes, she would often have gone to one of these stores to buy her shoes. Right. So one of the reasons that she has a few shoes and we have more is because of what was available in her town. Right. And the shoes that she bought would have been made almost exclusively in Minnesota or in the Midwest, that they wouldn't have been shipped in from outside. And there were hundreds of shoemakers actively working, and including shoe factories, actively working in Minnesota in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s, 20s, 30s. As mechanization increases, and indeed as globalization increases, the number of local shoemakers and shoe factories diminishes. Right? Do you know any shoe manufacturers still in Minnesota, just by the way? I'm sorry, Jean, you probably don't know any of these, right?
No, I don't, but I know here in New Hampshire, the last shoe factories closed, I think in the late 80s to early 90s. There were still, up until that point, one of the closest towns to us, that's Manchester. It's right on the Merrimack, where there were a lot of factories because of the Merrimack. There was still a shoe factory there up until the late 80s, and then there was another one further away from the river, and then there was one in Derry. But they are all closed now. One place is now a shopping mall, and the other has been repurposed. The factory itself has been repurposed into restaurants and offices and stuff. So at least the building itself is still there.
Right.
I
So
don't-
they're gone.
They're
right?
gone.
They're gone. Minnesota still has a couple. I mean, Red Wing shoes and Red Wing boots, Minnetonka moccasins.
I love my Minnetonka moccasins. I've had those since I was a child.
They're ours. You got them from us.
I know.
Though even those increasingly are being produced in China.
Yep.
They're working really hard to continue to hold on to the manufacture of them here. The other interesting one to me is the Rydell Skate Company, which is also in Red Wing. And if you think about how Sarah Christie would have skated, she wouldn't have had a separate pair of ice skates. She would have had runners that she attached to the bottom of her shoes. So I think it's a little bit cheating, but still perhaps slightly fair to think about that as a shoemaking company. And there is a fine craftswoman in St. Paul who is starting to hand make shoes again. But if I had you go through those shoes in your closet, those shoes that we wear and don't wear, very, very few of them would have been produced locally, let alone, I mean, in the nation, let alone locally. That our shoes now mostly come from Vietnam, from China, and there's, those, do you know where your Converses are made? Just by the way, Beth? Yeah,
Vietnam.
okay. And there's been a lot of controversy in the last few years about how those shoes are made in other countries, right? So why have all of these shoe companies abandoned the United States? Because in Vietnam, you can hire people for a lot less money to make your shoes so that I can afford to buy 50 pairs of shoes because the price of the shoes has come down. So we have specialization, we have industrialization, we have globalization, all showing themselves in our footwear. And again, I'm not so interested in footwear as I am in how looking at it can take us to these things that seem so abstract and show each of us to be an historical actor, right? That I am wearing contemporary history on my feet if I just pay attention to them. Now I do want to go back to Andrew Goodthunder. Now, I don't need you to know anything about him except by looking at this photo. And I'm not going to quiz you about him, but I want you to tell me, not guess what I think, but tell me about him from this photo. Now we know from his name that he is Native American, but that's sort of the only thing that's kind of a given about him. What do we know about him? What can we deduce?
He's well dressed.
And well dressed in a very 19th century dominant culture way.
Right.
That suit,
The hat.
the hat. Oh, the hat. Oh, I forget that hat all the time.
Yeah.
There's an
But it doesn't
implication.
look like it fits him correctly.
The suit.
The suit, like the jacket looks baggy on him, like it wasn't designed for him. Like it was either a mass market or someone else's.
Mhm.
But at the same time, the existence of the photo implies that he's got disposable income.
Okay.
you know, he had enough money to be able to afford to go to a photographer and get the picture taken, and then also ensure that the picture was maintained long enough to survive to digitization.
Because we know that it's a commercial photograph by the medallion at the
Mhm.
bottom of the photograph, right? So it was taken in, I think it's taken in Redwood Falls. Okay. But, and look at that backdrop. Those commercial photographers in the 19th century had many screens that they could drop down. It's like sometimes you see people on Zoom now who put a false background behind them so they look like they're in Hawaii or in their study when they're really in fact in Hawaii. So here's the, isn't this interesting, this background that he's chosen? It looks like a kind of 19th century portrait of a sort of painting, but that column is so kind of classical a column. Right, so we don't know in this case if he selected this background. We don't know if the suit belongs to the photographer or not. So we can't do a lot with the photograph, but it seems to me for him to allow himself to be photographed in this setting tells us something about how he's trying to adapt to life in Good Thunder or in Redwood Falls in 1899 Minnesota, right? Look at the chair. He's sitting, it's a bent wood chair. So it's less formal than many chairs in a photographer's studio might have been. So it has a little bit of handcraft feel about it. But it's clear what I'm especially interested in, of course, are his shoes. And that's yeah. Oh, it's pixelated so much that it doesn't, you can actually see them better in the big photograph. He has moccasins on. And actually they're pretty highly decorated moccasins. And if I look at this picture without looking at his shoes, it seems to me I may draw one conclusion or several conclusions about his attempt to assimilate or accommodate, or at least something about his relationship and his living between two cultures that leans toward the dominant culture. And then he has on those shoes. And it seems to me those shoes say, maybe, but look down here. Look at this. So this is maybe even a greater stake in identity than my Mary Jane's. In the resources, I would add, and I'll give you that after we hang up. There was a man named George Bonga, who is African-American and Ojibwe and probably something else. And there is a photo very like this photo of Andrew Goodthunder, though it's about 30 years earlier. And in that one, George Bonga is also wearing moccasins. You think, I wonder what they're doing and what that's about. So I can't answer very much, but I find him tantalizing, and his story, looking at his shoes, tantalizing.
Well, and then it also makes me wonder about that choice of chair.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about the chair then.
Well, so just looking at it, like you mentioned, it's bent wood. It's probably a less formal chair than what the photography studio traditionally uses, but it's also more nature-based. It's more natural. And so the moccasins make me wonder if that was part of that deliberate choice of like, this is more familiar to me and this is more comfortable to me.
And I wonder how much it's kind of an assertion
Mhm.
too, of you can make me appear in many ways, but you can't transform me.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in shoes as objects of rebellion. And I think about contemporary kids who I've seen who walk around with their shoelaces untied. Oh, it drives me crazy. Just sit down and tie up those shoes. I mean, and I think, I wonder if those kids are doing just what Andrew Goodthunder there was doing. I mean, that they're saying something, not in an explicit, in your face way that makes, I mean, that you could even object to explicitly, but saying something. Right? Then I am going to go to this wonderful, wonderful pair of shoes here. I had the great good fortune to spend 5 weeks at Mount Vernon in March this year on a research fellowship. And this is Martha Washington's wedding shoe. 1759, and it's 200 years old. I mean, it's 250 years old. And so it has lost much of its color. It was purple, and all of the decorations on it are silver, and even the thread was silver. I mean, it was silver spun into thread to make these extraordinary shoes for her. Over time, the color has faded and the silver has tarnished. But okay, tell me about her. What is Martha saying about herself with these shoes?
That she's not just a colonial backwater person kind of
You
thing.
bet.
Yeah.
I mean, these were handmade for her in London.
Yeah.
And all of her shoes, really from the time that she had been married before she married George Washington. So George was her second husband. She was widowed. When she married Daniel Custis, she married into one of the wealthiest families in Virginia. Her own family had not been nearly so well-to-do as his, and his father, in fact, had been a little reluctant to allow his son to marry this woman because she didn't have enough. I think she spent a good part of the rest of her life demonstrating, I'm enough, and I know how to do this, and I'm special. And so when she married, so right after that first marriage, she starts ordering her shoes. I don't know what she does before that, but once she starts keeping financial records, we know that she's ordering her shoes handmade in London. And I think handmade in London is a nice idea, but the disadvantage of doing that is that they may not fit. And there seem to be lots of fit problems, both for Martha and for George, having their shoes made in London. They could have had them made in Alexandria, Virginia, or probably even in Lynchburg there, but they didn't. They had them made in London. And I think that was what was important about them, and that they were in a European style, and they were as expensive and glittery as they could be. I wish we could see them in all of their glory. And they are really finely made. I think I have one other. Yeah, so here's a close-up of them. So they were very expensive. No, Martha brought into her marriage to George several dozen slaves or enslaved people. And by the time George Washington died, they together owned about 300 enslaved people. And each enslaved person was issued one pair of shoes a year. Martha's shoes probably cost, I mean, I can't, they cost more than 100 times what a pair of enslaved person's shoes cost on that plantation. Did that matter to her? Did she think about it? Did she worry about it? I don't know. And she never tells us. But it poses to me a really provocative question about Martha, and with her also about George, and what was it like to have that wealth in their own lives on this plantation. Now, George also had people who he called postilions. I'd never heard this word before I went to Washington. Postilion is the mounted horseman who rides next to the horses leading a carriage. And so the Washingtons dressed them in livery, and they got knee-high boots, and beautiful knee-high boots, never of the quality of George's, but much higher quality than the field hands ever got in terms of their shoes. What did that mean? And what's the legacy of that difference in American society? Okay. When George dies, there are 150 of the slaves are in his name. The rest are in hers and they're called dower property that she still owns by virtue of having been married to Custis. And Washington sets free only one of his enslaved people, and that was a man who had been his personal servant. And when he was no longer his personal servant, he made him the plantation shoemaker. But all of the other servants, they always only called them servants. All of the others were to be released when Martha died. And Martha ended up releasing all of those slaves a year after George died, because she came to fear for her life. And she wrote that in a letter to Abigail Adams, that they have a stake in my death, so maybe I am safer and better off. So that's just the beginning of the legacy of that of that footwear. And that we all live with variations of that now, right? You think in the African American community, how important trainers, sneakers, right? They have come to have a particular cultural value. And Michael Jordan and I want to call them the Jordaneers, but that's a singing group, right?
Air Jordans.
The Air Jordans became really iconic shoes in the African American community and then in basketball, and have shaped how all of the rest of us wear shoes. I think without those Air Jordans, those Converse would not have become as widespread, as popular, and as acceptable. And one of the things that Michael Jordan did was even introduce colored shoes into basketball. Prior to that, they all wore, by regulation, wore white shoes. And so there is also in all of this an expansion of individuality that becomes possible, right? So now if you can buy black Converse, or I even have a kind of nephew who collects shoes. He never even takes them out of the box, right? And you have special design shoes. I mean, it's become a thing, right? And that makes me just connect it back and wonder why Michael Jordan was the one who did that. Right? And then I'm going to take you to.
You just mentioned the Air Jordans.
Yeah.
Abby's younger brother.
Yep.
Has a pair right here.
Excellent.
What are they again, Tim?
Collector.
These are CP3s.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's just-
You're a basketball player, they're his shoes.
they're just the signet,
They're
just the
Chris Paul's basketball shoes.
Chris Paul, CP, Chris Paul
Right.
is the
It's-
basketball player. And
It's so
Tim-
interesting. Our shoes even have names.
And like you said, Tim doesn't collect them per se. He does wear them, but not often, and he keeps them nice and clean in their own box. Not their actual shoe box, but he has a container for them.
Well, they have taken on a value beyond fitting on your feet
Yes.
and beyond wearing on your feet. And for particularly, how old is that son?
Tim is 21.
The perfect age for exactly that kind of, and I'm going to say what all of this has done is turned us into very, very ambitious consumers. Right? So we become experts at brands, and we become expert at names, and we become expert at trademarks, and we become expert at things that
Oh, yeah. I think auto pair has class.
if I'm just trying to hear him and I can't quite hear him, hoping he's saying something interesting to us.
No, I think that's the TV in the other room.
Oh,
It is
okay.
not interesting.
Okay, so here's, now I'm going to go back to Sarah just for a minute. I'm sure that she had to have worn a pair of boots living out in the country as she did, living on a farm. So the closest that she got to a brand name were Storm Arctics for men and women. And the only difference between men's shoes and women's shoes were the size. Up until the Civil War, very few shoes were gender typed, nor were they even foot typed. Meaning that until the Civil War, most people wore shoes that were called straights. Right. All of us now wear socks that are straights, right? Where you buy a pair of socks and you can wear them on the right foot or the left foot. In the 19th century, people bought shoes that were straights, and some people always wore the one on the left and the other one on the right. Other people would sometimes alternate them so that they would break them in different ways. So they would sort of change, that make them conform to the foot or not. And the sizes were at best crude. And so they weren't gender typed, they weren't foot typed. Right, so here's, yeah, I can hear, I can't really hear Sarah saying, yeah, George, could we go out and buy some Storm Arctics? No, she wouldn't have done it. She wouldn't have had a name. Right? So she almost certainly received the Sears catalog. So in addition to those shops in Good Thunder, she could have ordered her shoes from the Sears catalog. So she had more choices, and that's how that catalog transformed many farm people's lives, by giving them more choices. I mean, no wonder, of course, it was called the Wish Book. And then this was just a different, this was an ad in the Good Thunder newspaper. See, and see, Jean, you would have been right at home in Good Thunder, because you can buy tan shoes, white shoes, black shoes, tan shoes. Right. That was your choice. All right. So I've gone on with this slightly longer than I quite intended. But not more than I'm interested. Right. And not more than I think the weight that our shoes can carry in walking us back into kind of an historical frame of mind. So that what I want us to do when we do history, think about history, is to think about ourselves as carriers of history. And that in this case, we walk on history all the time, and that we are historical actors, that we think we're making decisions out of our own free will, but there are forces at work that lead us to one thing or another. And that's the way in which we are shaped by history. It might feel like a sort of ridiculous shaping in terms of our shoes, but if it can even shape our shoes, what does it do to the rest of our lives? In what we can hope for, what we can imagine, what we can want, what we can dream. So I'm hoping that if we can think about our shoes in this way, we give ourselves actually greater freedom because we can see ourselves as constructs of a particular time. And if we can do that, we can deconstruct our particular times as well. So that's what I had. I had a good friend actually a few times ago when I gave a talk like this. She was going to come and then she said, "Oh, shoes. I am not interested in shoes. I am, and it was kind of her feminist response to paying attention to this ostensibly female thing. And I think it's where the heart is. It's where we learn our lessons, because it's where it touches each of us. So you've all been really helpful and cooperative in making this thing. And it's also after 7 and plenty of time to go home and have your dinners. But I'd love to have questions, conversation, criticisms, rejections, any of the above.
Yeah, Annette, I was thinking of my combat boots from when I was in the Army. And I liked when I got out, I felt comfortable wearing them because it like made me a little more grounded and just a little more confident, even in non-military, like academic settings. I'd wear my combat boots, just like, I don't know, a little more grounded.
Oh, that's really interesting. Some people say they walk differently depending on the shoes that they wear. That you don't walk taller because they're heels, you walk taller because the shoes invite you to stand up straighter or to have more confidence. And particularly Army boots of your generation would have had some cachet about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even just the structure that when you wore them, there was like particular day-to-day structure, and so when you put them on, you could have that at least on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
You could have that structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like the Doonesbury cartoon where the guy's always wearing his helmet or something. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I may steal that idea from you. Yeah, integrate it into another part of this.
Do you think that part of the reason that we have so many varieties of women's shoes, that started with women going into the workplace and trying to fit in, but still hold on to just a little bit of themselves? Men don't really notice shoes at that time. So if you had on a pair of shoes that just had a little bit of a sparkle on it, it just kind of made you stand out to other women would notice it, but the men might not.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I expect that your insight is exactly right. And it's many of us wore little ties when we started. I wore a blazer and a white blouse and a little tie. I was trying so hard to fit in those days, but the shoes, not quite. Yeah. Oh, thank you. What a nice idea.
I just, thought that might be a reason. I mean, I know people still do that with their shoes. They try and stand out with their shoes nowadays. They even try and do that with their socks. It used to be that you had to wear a pair of black socks with a pair of black trousers, or tan with tan trousers. And nowadays you could see somebody with pink socks under there just because they're making a statement.
Or a pink sock and a purple sock.
Yeah.
Socks not matching. I was in a an art gallery recently, and they were selling socks in sets of 3,
Mhm.
and none of them match. I mean, so the idea is you can lose one and you still have 2, and it doesn't matter because none of them matched in the first place.
I have a friend that deliberately mismatches her socks, but it's within a pack. So she'll buy like a pack of 6 socks, 6 sets of socks where there's like a red, a yellow, a blue, a green, purple pair. But she'll wear one of the purple socks with one of the red socks. But she won't mix those with socks from another package.
And you think about people taking the time to figure that out
Mhm.
and to think that through. And maybe it says something about how difficult it is to be an individual. That, I don't know, really, really interesting. How do we individuate ourselves? How do we separate ourselves from everybody else? How do we get noticed? And don't we all kind of want to be noticed? At least when we want to be noticed, right?
Well, and like talking about getting noticed. So when I was doing job interviews, it was in the middle of the pandemic, and all of my job interviews were over Zoom. And I've told Wayne this. I didn't wear a single pair of shoes to a job interview. I had like nice dress pants, nice shirt, everything ankle up was fine. And I'd either be like barefoot or in socks because I'm like, no one's going to see my feet. Why am I going through putting on, professional looking shoes?
Mhm. So you had to demonstrate your professionalism.
Right. But it didn't extend to my feet at that point
Yeah.
because no one was going to notice. So what was the point in putting in that effort?
Well, and if I were going to an interview, I would wear my black shoes and not my red shoes.
But which
Right.
black shoes?
Which black shoes? Well, then, not these black shoes. Probably now I would, because now I'm 70 years old and, people know already that I'm a little wacky, but me and Good Thunder, we both want to fit in and so Abby, I would turn it to you then to wrap up.
Yeah.
If you want
Are there
to.
any final thoughts, or we can start wrapping up? So I do want to thank our audience tonight for asking so many great questions and participating so well. And I also want to thank our presenter for sharing her valuable time and expertise with us. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's program and that you continue to join us in the future as we discuss everything from Antarctic exploration to trains and so much more. Check out our website, olmstedhistory.com, to keep up to date on all of our latest events. If you enjoyed tonight's program, consider making a donation to help us continue to offer this and other great programs, or consider becoming a member. A History Center of Olmsted County membership offers a wide variety of benefits, including access to free and reduced cost events like this. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Annette.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
It was very interesting.